This story is about an alien doctor who discovers metal embedded in a human's bones during a routine exam. What starts as a medical mystery soon challenges everything he knows about healing, pain, and human resilience. Dr. Revol, of the Vinari Medical Corps, prided himself on his unflappable composure. Across 37 solar cycles and 9 interstellar deployments, he'd triaged injuries in decompressed shuttle bays, excised crystalline parasites from high-leak diplomats, and once delivered quintuplets in microgravity while fending off a panicked father with 6 arms. But nothing in his training prepared him for the human. It was supposed to be a standard onboarding physical. The interspecies exploratory vessel Trinari Dawn had accepted a human crew member, part of a new Earth-Vinari exchange initiative. The human, Jackson Trent, had arrived 2 days ago, greeting everyone with an easy nod and a firm handshake that left Relvol's wrist aching for hours. Jackson had passed his preliminary vitals with perplexing normalcy. Body temperature absurdly high, cardiovascular rhythm chaotic yet somehow efficient, musculature denser than it should have been for a mammal with such soft epidermis. Still, nothing alarming, until the skeletal scan. Relvol watched the imaging panel as the skeletal map constructed itself layer by layer, vertebrae aligned in a column, ribs fanned outward, and then he froze. The image flickered as the system re-rendered for accuracy. There it was again. 2 long, rigid intrusions ran parallel to the femur in Jackson's right thigh. Metallic, opaque to standard wavelengths, threaded into bone like parasitic fangs. Relvol didn't breathe. He rechecked the scan with 3 alternative modes, adjusted for artifact anomalies, and even swapped out the imaging module for a higher resolution variant. The result was always the same. There was metal inside the human's bone. He stepped away from the console. His assistant, a bright green Savalti named Glarn, tilted its head. "Doctor, should I prepare containment?" Relval blinked. Containment? If it's a weapon or an infection vector, it could be some sort of dormant implant. That no, not yet. He cleared his throat. "Bring the human in, gently." Glarn slithered out, and a minute later Jackson entered the medbay, chewing on what looked like dehydrated fruit. "Hey Doc, everything all right?" Relval studied him. Upright, balanced gait, no signs of discomfort, no inflammation at the limb, no defensive posture. "Please sit." Jackson complied, still nibbling. "I need to ask you a question, and I request your utmost honesty," Relval said. "Have you recently been exposed to any invasive biomechanical entities?" Jackson frowned. "I don't think so, unless the coffee machine counts. It tried to eat my cup this morning." Relval did not laugh. He brought up the skeletal image and projected it in front of them. Jackson leaned in. "Huh," he said. "That's my leg." "You have foreign metal embedded in your femur." Jackson nodded. "Yeah, that's from the surgery. Broke it in college, skiing accident. Had a rod and screws put in." Relval blinked 3 times. "You introduced metal into your bone?" "Well, the doctors did. I just signed the forms." "And it remains in place?" "Yeah." "Why take it out? Bone healed around it. It's like reinforcement now. Titanium, I think." The Vinari doctor slowly lowered his scanner. He felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Doubt. "You do this often?" Jackson shrugged. "Sure. Plates, rods, screws. You break something bad and they put you back together like IKEA furniture." Revel turned to his console and summoned the collective medical encyclopedia. He searched Earth medical interventions, orthopedic surgical repair, internal fixation. The search results piled up. He pressed a tentacle to his temple. "You voluntarily allow metal to be embedded in your bodies permanently?" "Not all the time, only when we need it." Jackson shifted in his chair. "What's the big deal?" Relval gestured to the scan. "This should trigger an immune cascade, reject the foreign material, induce necrosis, At the very least, a reactive growth. Jackson looked vaguely amused. Nah, titanium's biocompatible. Our bodies don't really notice it. That's not possible. It's very possible. I ran a half marathon with that leg 6 months after the surgery. Took a year to get back to full strength, though. So, Revelal stared at the human. A year. And now he walked with no limp, no brace, and casually discussed it while chewing fruit. There was a long silence. Are you going to write this down? Jackson asked. Seems like the kind of thing you'd want to report. I need to reevaluate several medical assumptions, Jackson grinned. You and me both. When I saw your heart is on the wrong side, I almost freaked. Reval felt himself sway. He pulled out a chair and sat. Not because he was tired, because he was alarmed, intrigued, deeply unsettled. Later that day, he quarantined the scan data for cross-species review. 3 other Vinari specialists reviewed the images. All of them asked the same question. Was this human attacked? Relval responded with one line. No. He paid someone to do it. The next day began with a summons. Relval hadn't slept. His neural glands were still overactive from the implications. The idea that humans routinely inserted surgical hardware into their bodies and simply kept functioning wasn't just medically baffling, it was a philosophical affront. Vinari medicine viewed the body as sacrosanct, to be repaired delicately, invisibly, and never permanently altered with synthetic materials. The ship's medical advisory board called an emergency consultation. They were already assembled when Relval entered the chamber. 6 Vinari physicians, 1 Lurian immunopathologist, and a Zotiri neurologic analyst sat in layered silence, their attention fixed on the holographic scan of Jackson's leg. The human's femur, laced with titanium-like scaffolding from an industrial site, hovered in midair. The head of the board, Senior Medicres Javarine, turned. You confirm this human functions normally? Ambulated into the clinic unaided. Reported no discomfort. Exhibits full range of motion. And the metal remains inert? As far as we can determine. Javarin steepled her fingers. Then we must assume his immune system is compromised. Relval shook his head. It's not. His antibody profile is robust. Their physiology simply accepts the implant as neutral. Javarin's spines twitched, a clear sign of incredulity. The neurologic analyst blinked her vertical pupils. Has the human agreed to deeper scans? He signed a consent release for standard biointegration imaging. And what did that show? Relval hesitated. Bone density increased around the implant. Osteointegration. The body actually grew into the metal. A moment of silence followed. Even the exotiri, normally stoic to the point of apathy, whispered, madness. Lava rubbed his eye ridge. They do it to children sometimes, for spinal corrections, or skull fractures. There are hundreds of variations, screws, pins, plates, even artificial joints. Why not use regeneration therapy? One of the Lurians asked, wings fluttering. Why not wait for organic healing? They do. But when bones are shattered, alignment must be preserved. Without internal fixation, healing is imperfect, misaligned. Why not external? Asked Javarin. Relval swallowed. Because humans move too much. That got their attention. They cannot remain immobile long enough for complex fractures to self-heal with precision. Their restlessness causes misalignment, so they solve it with engineered stability. You mean they cannot sit still long enough to recover? Javarin sounded somewhere between horrified and fascinated. Correct. The room absorbed this in contemplative silence. Later, aboard the Trinari Dawn's medical bay, Relval scheduled a second examination with Jackson. This time, Jackson arrived in gym clothes, sweating, with a towel around his neck. Sorry, was on the treadmill. You need more scans? Relval tried to suppress his astonishment. You were running? Yeah, 5 miles. Gotta keep the leg strong. Relval guided him back to the scanner. The imaging bed hummed to life, and the sensors crawled across Jackson's body. This time, they expanded their scope. The previous scans had only focused on the thigh. Now, Relval traced mineral densities throughout the human's entire skeleton. His ribs, collarbone, and even part of his left wrist showed subtle signs of previous trauma, minor healing lines, microabrasions, bone remodeling. "You've broken more than one bone," Jackson chuckled. "A few. Football in high school, snowboarding, bicycle accident. I think I cracked a rib once wrestling my cousin. Then? Takes a while. 6 weeks for the wrist, about 2 months for the rib. Leg took the longest, still has the metal in there, obviously." Relval stared at the screen. "This is not unusual among your species." "Nope. We break stuff all the time." He pointed to his wrist. "This one was stupid. Tried to jump from a roof into a pool. Slipped." Relval blinked. "You attempted to leap from a height onto water intentionally?" "Nope. Yeah. Takes a lot to land a right hook on it like that." "It took a while." 6 weeks for the wrist." "Nope." He pointed to something else. "Yeah. Takes a lot to land a right hook on it like that." "It took a while." "Yeah." He pointed to something else. "I was 16. We're not smart at 16. Relval turned and quietly ordered a neurostructural baseline. He was beginning to think human recklessness wasn't a behavior but a developmental stage. 2 hours later, the scan results completed. The metal in the femur had slight corrosion but nothing dangerous. Bone had fully fused along the rod and screws. The immune cells clustered mildly near the area but showed no attack vectors. The hardware was, for all intents and purposes, part of him now. Relval compiled the data, encrypted it, and filed it under interspecies medical anomalies. He marked it level 3, ongoing observation required. When Jackson stood to leave, he noticed Relval's hesitation. "You all right, Doc?" Relval studied him. "You suffered a traumatic injury, required internal reinforcement, healed for a year, and then you resumed high-impact motion?" "Yeah." "Without fear of re-injury? I'm careful, but no. It healed. I trust it." Relval sat in silence as the human walked out. Later that night, he received a message from Medical Command. Word of Jackson's scan had reached the Central Authority. The reply was short. "Request full medical dossier on human subject. Consider requesting surgical observation of future injury." Relval shuddered. They were expecting the human to break something again, and the terrifying part was, they were probably right. Jackson Trent broke his arm 6 weeks later. It wasn't during a mission or mechanical repair or while rescuing someone from a collapsed access corridor like Relval imagined. No, it happened during a game the humans called wall tennis, a bizarre exercise where one launched a ball against the corridor's bulkhead and ricocheted back with a paddle. No protective gear. No supervisor. Just 2 humans laughing until one tripped, caught himself poorly, and cracked his ulna. The moment the emergency signal pinged, Relval dropped everything. He reached the medbay just as the door hissed open and Glarn wheeled in the stretcher. Jackson lay atop it, left forearm elevated and splinted with ship-standard trauma foam. His expression was tight but calm. Relval approached. "You injured yourself again." Jackson grimaced. "Yeah. Arm bent in a way it definitely wasn't supposed to." "Pain level? 7. Maybe 8 if I move it." Glarn leaned closer, offering a mild analgesic vapor. Jackson inhaled, exhaled, then visibly relaxed. Relval ran a diagnostic wand across the limb. The bone had fractured cleanly, distal third of the ulna. He nodded. "We need imaging to confirm severity." "I figured. You want me still?" "Yes. Do not move. And for your species' sake, do not joke about it. I wasn't gonna, Jackson muttered. Relval guided the stretcher into the imaging chamber. The scan commenced. 2 minutes later, a 3D reconstruction bloomed in the center of the room. The break was sharp, not displaced, but clean through. No fragmenting. Relval felt tension ease slightly. It was treatable without surgical intervention if the human didn't stress it. Still, his orders from medical command remained. They wanted direct observation. Relval would now have the chance to watch a human bone heal firsthand. He briefed Jackson. You will require immobilization for 6 weeks, then progressive loading. I will monitor integration via weekly scans. Jackson nodded, only wincing once. Sounds familiar. You are not permitted to lift, push, or climb. This is non-negotiable. I know, Doc. I've done this dance before. Relval frowned. And yet you voluntarily engaged in impact recreation without protective restraints? Jackson smirked, then winced again. You ever try doing nothing for long stretches? Humans go stir-crazy. Relval narrowed his gaze. Are you implying boredom led to self-harm? Not deliberately. Just we like motion. Sitting still feels like failure. Fascinating. Relval tapped the notes into his console. He supervised the splint application personally. Using a reinforced polymer mold and custom sensing fibers, he configured a rigid external brace calibrated to resist muscle contraction torque. Jackson winced as the material set, then relaxed as the neural block dampened the pain. The next morning, Relval initiated the healing protocol log. Every 3rd day, Jackson returned for scans. As the weeks progressed, the callus around the fracture site thickened, mineral deposition accelerated. After 4 weeks, remodeling began. After 6, partial weight-bearing commenced under close supervision. By week 7, Jackson lifted a 10-kilo crate using both arms, while Relval monitored joint angle and strain vectors with obsessive focus. The bone had not just healed, it was adapting. Density increased slightly around the former break, forming a stronger than original structure. This, Jackson explained, was something called Wolff's Law. The human skeleton reinforced itself where stress was encountered. Relval submitted an update to medical command. Fracture healed within expected human time frame. Regrowth and structural integrity observed. Subject followed protocol and resisted early exertion despite clear agitation from inactivity. The reply came 2 days later. Request complete documentation of surgical history, including previous femoral implantation. Seek opportunity to observe internal repair procedure if future injury occurs. Relval forwarded the message to the human liaison with a note. Please advise your personnel to avoid further damage for the sake of collective sanity. The liaison responded with a meme of a skeleton doing a thumbs up. Relval had no idea what it meant. By week 8, Jackson had full range of motion. During the final scan, Relval noticed something else. A small chip of metal was embedded just below the wrist joint, separate from the fracture site. You have additional metal? Jackson looked, then laughed softly. Oh, that's from the plate I had there a few years ago. Took a fall while rock climbing. Shattered the radius. Relval stared. So, you had an implant removed? Yeah, once the bone healed and stabilized. Surgeon said it wasn't needed anymore. Sometimes they leave them in, sometimes they pull them out. But the implant site shows no scar tissue. Jackson rolled up his sleeve. A faint pale line crossed his wrist. It faded. Relval tapped it gently. This was opened. Surgically. And your body erased the trace? Basically. We scar differently, depending on where and how deep. Relval stood back. His gaze swept across the human's arm, leg, spine. Your species rewires itself, reinforces, repairs with metal, then removes it and rewrites itself again. Jackson's brow furrowed. We just try to keep going? Even if it means replacing pieces of yourself? Yeah, whatever it takes. Relevol turned away, both impressed and disturbed. Human medicine wasn't just biology, it was engineering. Sciences wasn't just biology, it was engineering, a kind of mechanical hope. Instead of fearing failure, they built scaffolds over it. For the first time, Relevol realized that humans did not see their bodies as sacred. They saw them as tools. And tools could be broken, but more importantly, they could be fixed. Relevol stood at the observation deck, watching Earth loom large through the viewpane. The Trinari Dawn was entering orbit for the final phase of the interspecies exchange. The crew would disembark within the next day, each species to report their findings and return to their homeworlds. Medical Command had asked for a full verbal debrief of the human anomaly. The anomaly, in this case, was currently in the gym doing modified push-ups on a foam pad, freshly healed arm flexing without hesitation. Relevol turned back to the table of research notes, medical scans, and behavioral logs. He hadn't added to them in days. Everything significant had already happened. It was time to understand what it all meant. Jackson knocked once before entering. "Hey, Doc, got your message? Sit, please." Jackson flopped into the chair, toweled sweat from his forehead, and sipped water from a thermoflask. "I've completed your profile, full biometric records, injury history, recovery metrics, and surgical legacy." "Cool. That's what, 100 pages? 317. Jackson let out a low whistle. "You're thorough." Relevol adjusted the projection field. A new image appeared, a composite of Jackson's skeleton, annotated with healed fracture lines, past implant sites, and adaptive density zones. The bones told a story longer than most medical files he'd seen. You broke your leg at 19, wrist at 22, several ribs by 25, and now the ulna at 31. Don't forget the nose at 20. Got elbowed during a bar fight. That one healed without intervention? Yeah, crooked but functional. Relevol folded his limbs. You've suffered more cumulative injuries than most Venari soldiers in active service, yet you continue high-impact behavior. Why? Jackson shrugged. Because life doesn't stop just because we get banged up. You allow surgical reconstruction, embed metal in your bones, remove it when no longer needed. You break, you adapt, you recover. That's the idea. Relevol leaned forward slightly. What drives this? Why not avoid the risk altogether? Jackson hesitated for a moment, genuinely thinking. Because risk is part of the deal. We don't aim to get hurt, but we accept that it might happen, and when it does, we want to be ready to fix it. Move on, keep going, even if it hurts. Especially if it hurts. Relevol tapped his console. The scan dissolved, replaced by a real-time medical chart. All green, stable vitals, full musculoskeletal clearance. Your body is functional, but I suspect your resilience isn't entirely physical. Jackson smiled. It's not. That's the thing. Our bodies heal slower than yours, sure. But the will to get back up, that's wired in. Relevol recorded that sentence verbatim. Then he closed the file. You are medically cleared, and you have altered the Vinari understanding of adaptive biology. Jackson stood and stretched. Glad I could help. Not gonna lie, though I'm kinda looking forward to a break from being a science project. Relevol rose, then paused. Before you go, I must show you something. He walked to a sealed storage cabinet and retrieved a small medical implant module. It was sleek, made of composite alloy, and shaped to fit a femur. Jackson recognized it immediately. That's one of our rods? A replica, based on the scans from your surgery. Jackson tilted his head. Why'd you make that? To study. To understand. But more importantly, to remember. The Vinari have no historical precedent for incorporating synthetic materials inside biological tissue without rejection. We will now develop such protocols, beginning with this." Jackson looked both surprised and honored. "You planning to use it on one of your own?" Relval nodded slowly. "Eventually, but only if necessary. Your methods are not ideal for us, but they reveal a truth we'd overlooked." "Which is?" Relval met his eyes. "That healing isn't always about restoring what was lost. Sometimes it's about accepting a new version of yourself, one that includes what was broken." Jackson's smile faded into something more thoughtful. That's exactly it." As Jackson turned to leave, Relval spoke again, quieter this time. "Will you continue these dangerous games on Earth?" "Probably. But I'll be more careful. I promised Glarn I wouldn't scare him again. He requested I sedate you permanently." Jackson laughed. "Tell him I'll keep my limbs intact for a while." 3 hours later, as the shuttle descended toward the atmosphere, Relval submitted his final report. Subject demonstrated extraordinary resilience. Human bone can regrow around metal, integrate it, and later remove it without long-term dysfunction. Subject's willingness to endure pain, embrace synthetic augmentation, and resume full activity reflects not recklessness, but an evolved cultural norm of adaptive recovery. They do not merely survive injury, they evolve from it. He added one final note before transmitting. "I believe this is why they explore, not because they are unafraid to break, but because they trust they can be repaired." And with that, the file closed. The anomaly was no longer unexplained, just different. And perhaps, in a galaxy full of brittle species, different was exactly what was needed.